But 20 years in the Legion will make a boy man. 20 years in the Legion and they will give you land. 20 years in the Legion, you'll always have a home. 20 years in the legions of Rome.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second series of How Shit Works of the Hound and Stag Presents show. Tonight we'll be covering the peerages. The second series covers the peerages. Tonight's episode is The Laurel, where we'll discuss what happens in the Meridian Laurel meetings, their rules, how they run, what they talk about, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get to bust some myths. All right, so I'm one of your hosts, Graf Ulrich. I'm a knight, a pelican, and a role peer. As always, I am joined by Meridian's own personal motivation coach, and the Baron of Get Good Scrub himself, Sir Erik.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sir Erik Martell, Knight of Kittens, bringer of joy, and I'm a knight and a royal baron. Tonight, I get the honor of introducing tonight's guests and subject matter experts, Dame Stephanie and Mistress Tadc. Please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves and let the audience know something about you.
Tig, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Mistress Tadc McNewetta. I have been playing since 1989, and I was Laureled 17 years ago, 2004, and I am considered a dance Laurel in Indian dance during Akbar's reign, the 1500s.
So I am Dame Stephanie of Nethyrwode. I've been playing since about 1983. Yeah, that's right. And I was Laureled in 2000. I'm a pelican and a Laurel, and I got my pelican first. I was pelicaned in 1996 or 1997. I've eaten and slept since there, so the dates get kind of fuzzy after a while. I've also had a kid since then, so the dates get really fuzzy after a while. My primary art was calligraphy and illumination, and I dabbled a little bit in Maholica, which is ceramics, Italian ceramics. But primarily my thing is making pretty pictures. So I like to embroider, which is doing pretty pictures with thread on fabric. And the Maholica is making pretty pictures on pottery. And obviously illumination is making pretty pictures with just paint and ink and on standard paper. So that's me. And I've been in Meridia's the whole time.
Well, welcome both of you to the show, and thanks so much for being here. We're really honored to have you.
Thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome. So last week we started a new portion of the show, which is the drinking game. Tonight's words for the drinking game are mastery, as chosen by Mistress Tadc, rabbit hole, as chosen by Dame Stephanie, and because our tech guru hates me, the Honorable Lady Jessica chose documentation, which may possibly kill me tonight.
So that's three.
I had a chance. What was that, sir?
So that's three.
It's three.
Right. You said all three of them.
Doesn't count when we're announcing them. I hate you. For the record, I'm drinking Jameson's tonight, which is a Meridianized version of an Irish mule. As always, we'd like to thank Between Two Peers for allowing us to become a licensed franchisee of their drinking game. And I have documentation for that.
Good. We'll ask for that after the show.
Right, quick, as always. Guys, if you don't want to drink, that's fine. If you don't want to drink alcohol, that's fine. We're not forcing anyone to do anything. We're just having fun.
Yes, please just have fun. Make yourselves happy. We hope you both got a chance to watch our previous shows. And if so, was there anything you thought we missed or that you'd like to add about those previous shows?
No, very informative. Probably some of the best stuff. I almost think we're going to be reiterating most of the show with a few changes. So they covered a lot. You guys hit it all.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the Chivalry show. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was when you touched on the way Meridies does things strangely, weirdly, differently from the rest of the known world in peerage meetings. You know, having to kind of sit with the out of kingdom guys, going, "It's different. Don't freak out." And I've had a couple of people, because I was secretary of the Pelican for a while, and I've had some people ask me, "What is this whole thing with, you know, the whole recommendation and the secretary runs the thing, and it's not just the crown makes all the decisions, and I don't understand, and this really confuses me." And I asked some of our old time Pelicans, because it came up in that. And I have a theory, you know, I don't know all the answers, but I have a theory about it. So Meridies was actually a principality of Adenvelt way back when. And before Meridies became a kingdom, and even when we were a principality, the king and queen of Adenvelt never came out here. They didn't know anybody here. And at least with the Pelican, when the Pelican was created, it was created by the society. And they said, "All right, we made a few pelicans, and now kingdoms go forth and do things and make pelicans." And my understanding from talking to some of the folks that were here at the time was the crown of Adenvelt contacted the few pelicans who'd been made by society and said, "We don't know anybody in your kingdom, so tell us, who should we elevate?" And so the 2 or 3 of them got together and came up with some names and forwarded them to the crown. And the crown pretty much elevated the people they recommended. And because Meridies largely developed in isolation for years after that, because we were what is now Trimaris, Glenavon, and Meridies, developed in isolation, I suspect that at least to some extent, that may be part of why Meridies has such a collaborative form of peerage recommendation to the crown, because that kind of, here you go, tell me what you want, and then we'll do it, because we don't know any of your guys because we've never been there before. So that's a theory that I have.
I've actually heard something similar before, and that's awesome. That's actually gives you a good feeling for what actually happens here and how we got there, and it makes good logical sense. I like that. All right, so before we get into what actually happens in the Laurel's meetings, and you guys have alluded to it a little bit in your introductions, we don't really have a glaive knight or a sword and shield knight. We don't have, to my knowledge, autocrating autocrating pelicans or feast pelicans. Maybe that's where their service focus is, but we never introduce ourselves as that. But I constantly hear Laurels say, I'm a scribal Laurel, or I'm a dance Laurel. Why is that? Can you explain why you guys give that differentiation when none of the other peerages really do that?
Sure, I can start with that one if you want.
Sure, great.
It really has to do with mastery. So we as Laurels are specifically finding a mastery, a skill that we try to perfect. We'll put that, and it really narrows down by the time you're ready for that next step. And mastery has to do with a very specific, narrow type of art or science that we're going into. So you don't have a huge, you can have a broad field, but your mastery, the subject matter that you're working on is very specific, and you're proud of that. So you want to make sure people understand, this is where I was laureled in, this is what I did. Also, I don't want everybody to think just because I'm a laurel, I can sew anything. I have a hard time sewing a button on. So somebody will come up to me sometimes like, hey, could you sew something for me? And I'm like, oh, I wish I could. So hope that helps.
No, that makes good sense.
Okay.
Yeah, and also Meridies is not, we don't constrain our people to one specific area. We've got folks that have just been amazingly fabulous at a bunch of different things. People who focus very narrowly on one thing. So we're not really, we're generally recognized when we're Laurel for a primary sort of thing. The thing that I really loved was calligraphy and illumination, but I was also doing some good stuff with my Mahaloka. But so we kind of get Laureled for a primary sort of thing, but most of us keep learning. And there are Laurels in the circle now who are largely masters at like numerous areas because they just keep digging in and learning. And if you tried to say that Mistress Roz is a Laurel for a thing, we'd all laugh you out of the circle in a heartbeat. And there are so many of us who have broadened our perspective so much and gone in so many different directions. So we don't really have, not really tied into necessarily one area, but we usually are recognized generally for one area when we're elevated, because that's the thing that we really loved, that the passion carried us, over the threshold in that. But it's not necessarily the one box that defines us.
And the thing is, we get bored just like everybody else. So if you've mastered one thing, you may want to go on to another. And, stepping out of that is part of it too. So you can learn maybe even the skills that your apprentice is learning that you don't know, you can learn along with them. So you're definitely, I'm not pigeonholing anyone. It's just that when we do say, I'm a dance Laurel or something like that, that's usually what we were noticed for.
Gotcha.
So tonight we're going to cover what happens in Laurel's meeting, but my question is going to start a little bit before that. What, if anything, were you told to expect, or what did you yourself expect from your first meeting?
So I don't know that I was ever really told what to expect in a meeting. And I'll qualify that by, again, I got my Pelican first. So I'm going to kind of generally talk about peerage meetings as opposed to the Laurel meeting. And it's possible that in my vigil or vigils, somebody said something about what to expect and what to do and what not to do. But a lot of people will tell you that your vigil is a really awesome experience that you come out of with a lot of feels and not a lot of coherence. Because there's a lot that goes on. But I had a general idea of what to expect because I'd been in OVO and BOW meetings. And if most of us, it's not a stepping stone, don't get me wrong, the OVO and the BOW meetings and the Sable Sword meeting and the Legion of the Bear, and those are not stepping stones to a peerage, but a lot of people who end up being peers end up being in those orders, because if you're doing that kind of stuff, those orders are generally going to recognize you at some point in your journey. So if you've been going to those meetings, they're not incredibly different. I mean, there's a difference between the orders of high merit and the peerage meetings, but the general feel of the meeting is the same. You've got a secretary, you have an agenda, somebody's running the discussion, you're discussing candidates, you're discussing various other things, the crown is there. So that in and of itself, you're sharing your opinion on people. So I had a fairly good idea going into the peerage meetings what to expect in a broad sort of way. Now, I'm sure that everybody kind of remembers people telling you things like, sit down and be quiet in your first meeting and just listen and get a feel for what people are going to say. I have a different, maybe an unpopular opinion, but I generally tell people, you know what? We're elevating you because you're part of us. We think you should be there. If you have an opinion and if something comes up and you feel strongly about it, then share your thoughts, because we didn't ask you here to be a church mouse. If you're not comfortable speaking yet, then don't. That's fine. This is your journey. And so if you're not sure, feel free to sit next to me. I'll be happy to hold your hand, because, it's your first meeting, you're getting your feet wet, you're getting your balance. But if something comes up and you have something to contribute, then throw it out there, because we didn't ask you here for your pretty face. It's pretty face. We like your pretty face. But we asked you here because you have a voice that we want to hear, and you're an asset to the order. My first Pelican meeting had its own certain challenges, because my very first meeting, I found myself having to share some unpopular opinions about a couple of folks that the order was not prepared to hear, because when I got elevated, I was the Pelican on the ground in that area. Right. And it's like, well, that's fun. I hadn't actually expected to be the voice of maybe this isn't the best plan right now, especially when the crown really was for that candidate. That was fun. But sometimes you have to speak from the heart, and if you're not ready, it's fine to sit and take your time. But people will tell you different things, and people have different philosophies, and ultimately you have to go with what's in your heart. And if you've been to an OVA meeting or a BOW meeting, then you're probably generally prepared for what you're going to be dealing with in the circle.
Yep. That's fair. Jay, you got anything you want to add?
She's covered it. That's really it. I didn't have any expectations going in. Nobody told me anything. They're just like, hey, come on. We had a meeting. So my first meeting was fascinating. I'm going to put it that way. A lot of people have very good things to say about their first meetings. I do not. That was a shock to the system. And something that I was not expecting. We had a candidate brought up by a sponsor, and the feedback was not what the sponsor expected, and there was a cry fest and a little temper tantrum, and this went on for quite some time. And then after the meeting was over with and everybody broke, there were people, the other Laurels coming up, apologizing to me for that, and it really shocked my system to see that, because you kind of build up everybody to that status, I'm going to be part of this, and then to have them, basically you realize, hey, these are people too. Yeah. So just be prepared and be patient, and it works itself out.
It does. For anyone watching who's out of Kingdom, our Order of the Bow, our Order of the Ovo, Sable Sword, and our Legion of the Bear are grant level polling orders, where they also get to poll and recommend the crown. And of course, the crown makes the final decision as always. But those will be shows coming up later in the series, where we'll cover those.
Stay tuned.
Make sure you stay tuned. All right, so we get to the meeting itself, and let's pretend, and I do mean pretend, that I am a brand new Laurel. We'll call it in carousing. And I'm walking into my first order meeting. What should I expect to see or to have done prior to prepare myself for it? And how long is this thing going to go? I know the Knights bring beer. Is there a tradition of bringing something for the Laurels?
Yeah, cookies. The baseline is cookies, although sometimes people bring something else. A nice little cheese plate or something. We're big on mimosas. That's not necessarily, you're not necessarily as the new baby Laurel required to bring all the booze, but we have a tendency to be generous with our BYOB. So, if somebody brings a mimosa, they've probably brought enough to share. So there won't be a big cooler of beer there, but there will probably be a fair amount of cookies. And the baby Laurels are generally the ones who bring the noshies.
Cool.
And then the secretary is the one who runs the meeting. And she will be handing out agendas. Lately we've had mostly ladies doing it, but a smart secretary will usually ask somebody else to take the notes, so the secretary can kind of watch the meeting and keep it on track. And the crown will usually be there, and usually the crown is asked if they want to say something as soon as the meeting is open, because it's their meeting. It's like, do you have any business? Anything we can do for you? Do you want to address the order? Then we move into candidate discussion, and once we get through candidate discussion, there's usually some other things that we'll talk about, and until we run out of time.
Just right quick, I was remiss when I was covering our grant level orders. I also left off the Meridian Order of the Blade and the Scarlet Star, which are also our grant level orders of high merit. My apologies for anyone in those orders that I wasn't intentional. I was just trying to cover the ones that Mistress Stephanie hadn't mentioned when she was covering her earlier portion of the show. Tig, you have any advice for me at my first Laurels meeting for carousing?
Like she said before, listen, and if you got something to say it. Don't worry about it. Let it rip. And we try to keep it about an hour long, unless they go crazy, but an hour is enough. For most everyone, we've all got other things that we got to get to. Mm-hmm. But just try to enjoy it, relax. That's the hardest part, because I go in with anxiety. I really do. I'm pretty shy. Most people don't know that. And I have a hard time sometimes, even going to meetings now. So, just get a sitting pal. That's another thing. A drinking buddy, a sitting pal, whatever you want to call it. So it makes it easier.
If you don't have anyone to sit by in a meeting, come find Eric or I, and you sit by us. Everything will be fine. I mean, except for the Laurels meeting, we've got nothing there. Mr. St. John would like to point out that there is occasionally beer if they follow the Knights meeting.
Yes, whatever's left over.
So I'm really sorry about you guys getting the leftover beer.
We're not.
Might be Seth's. I mean, as we covered last week and for the period shows, I feel contractually obligated to say that this is how things normally work here in Meridian. Things are always subject to change. And those of you who are watching from out of Kingdom may find our processes a little odd. So we've already covered a bit of this, but I'm going to ask it again to make sure we get the entirety of it. After the beginning of the meeting, who calls the meeting to order? And we've already talked about how basically the secretary in conjunction with the crown runs it, but how does it run? In that, do you follow Robert's Rules of Order, or what are your general order guidelines and things like that for holding a meeting?
Okay. So I don't know that we strictly follow Robert's Rules of Orders. Even the Pelican isn't very strict, but the Pelican's a little bit more anal about that. Ooh, did I break Ulrich already?
Nope. I just snorted some
Ulrich.
Jameson.
But the secretary runs the meeting, generally calls it to order. So we have an agenda that the secretary has pulled together in advance. There's a deadline to get all of your stuff in if you want to be on the agenda. And we collect, generally, we're wanting to know, we want a letter on a candidate, and we usually want some kind of portfolio, so that we can all see the artwork that we're looking at, and we want a little bit of information about the candidate so that we have that to evaluate before we get to the meeting. The general flow of things is, in order to take a poll and recommend or not recommend to the Crown, we usually do two formal discussions on a candidate at two separate meetings within an 18-month period. Has to be within an 18-month period. You can do it at two subsequent meetings, or you can do it at one meeting and then sometime in the next 18 months. Depends on whether people want to see a little bit more on a couple of projects or something. If they want to see a little bit more growth and development, or what they're doing on this particular project, they want to see how it comes out. So we'll start with usually the discussions. I'm looking at the rules. I pulled them up so I'd have kind of a clue. I can't remember from the last Laurel meeting, but I think we usually try and do second discussions first, so that, if there's anybody that we're on, second discussion, if there's going to be a long discussion, we want to get those people who are closer to being recommended to the Crown done and taken care of, so that we don't, find ourselves at the end of the meeting and we've had our first discussions, and now these people that have been waiting, we can't get to them. So after we've had our discussions, if they've gone well, we'll say, Your Majesty, we recommend this candidate to you for elevation, and they'll have a brief discussion with the sponsor to try and figure out, are we going to do a drive-by Laurel right now? Are we going to go talk to them? Are we going to do a writ? Is it going to be a big dark secret until another time? Nobody talk to these people. Nobody go offer congratulations until we tell you it's okay. And we'll move through whatever candidates are on the agenda, and the secretary is generally shepherding that process the whole way through. Every now and again, if it gets really long-winded, somebody will pop up and say, okay, this is a love fest. Does anybody have any concerns? Or does anybody have anything that we haven't heard before? Because, right now we've got a pattern of this is awesome, me too, ditto, and we're running out of time. Are there any concerns? Does the sponsor need to hear anything that, hasn't been said yet? And generally in these discussions, if the Crown has something to say, they always get to jump to the top of the line. They, if they say, I want to say something, it's like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You get to jump to the top of the line in your comments. Once we get through the folks that we're actually going to hopefully vote on, have two discussions, have their second discussion, we'll move on to anybody who's on first discussion. And again, we'll go through that. And then once we've finished candidate discussions, a lot of times we'll have other things that we talk about. And again, the secretary is running those discussions. We all know what's coming up because we've seen the agenda. Those discussions have a tendency to be things like, so if there was an A&S fair today, who did really well? Who should we be looking at? Who did a great job? And because we're part of the Gulf War kingdoms, we get to send Gulf War champions. So especially at the meetings associated with the fairs, we usually take names of people that we're thinking about recommending to the Crown to be Gulf Wars champion. And over the course of the year, we're kind of keeping track of those people, so that usually after midwinter, which is in February, we'll have a slate of people that we recommend to the crown as these are the folks that we think would make really good champions. You get to make the final decision on who that would be. And then we talk about a couple of the other fairs and, you know, what's coming up and stuff like that. Does that kind of answer more of your details?
You answered that question. The next two.
Yep. Mistress Tig, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
It's fine.
One of the main differences that you'll find with us in the chivalry is that a lot of the artisans and individuals will have what I used to call the SEA resume. We ask that our candidates will hold portfolios of all their work. And sometimes that's up to the Laurel or the candidate. But we like to see that portfolio of work when the candidates are being discussed, like she's talked about. But it's very important for those people, the artisans, to keep that up to date and keep their documentation in there. That is a huge difference between us and a lot of the other groups.
And we actually have a very private Facebook setup where we can kind of throw out some of the portfolio stuff of candidates that are being discussed, so that we can kind of see that before the meeting, so that we have a way of, and it's locked down. You know, it's only for the Laurels, and I think we pull it off after all the discussions are done. That way, none of that information, none of that artwork gets out into the wild. So, you know, people don't have to worry about their intellectual property getting out, and also so that nobody knows they're being discussed. But that's a way that we can see their ongoing work as they're being discussed.
That's good stuff. I'm kind of going to be repeating myself here for a second, but the next question was supposed to be, now that the meeting's been brought to order and we know what we're talking. Things are starting to. Now, wow, what kind of things are we talking about on the Shiv meeting? It'd be what kind of things are on the agenda. I think you've covered that, unless there's something you'd like to add. That was some really good information, by the way, especially the stuff about the Gulf Wars champions and how that works.
It was very good information. We've also covered candidate discussion a little bit, but traditionally in the chivalry, only a peer brings up their student. Does that hold true for the Laurel? And also, how is the process for non-associates done, and how do you handle populist letters?
You want to grab part of that, Tig?
As far as I know, it's been a while since I've done it. I know that when I was in meetings, it was the sponsor's responsibility to bring their own candidate. You know, it's our job to present and show the work that the candidates are doing and just be their voice. As far as others, a lot of times we might have a connection to that person. So somebody that feels very strongly or connected to that person will bring them up if they're not a specific candidate that we have, you know, i.e. that's not my apprentice, but I think this person's doing wonderful work. They don't have a belt from anyone. I'd like to be their voice in the circle. As far as letters, I believe they've always been read. So, you know, we're going to take into account everything that's sent into us. And they're read, we have different, what we call a watch list. So that's a candidate that we're watching, that we're, watching the progress. And a lot of times the letters really focus on that so that we can put them and really pay attention to what that person's doing.
And a lot of times when we get a populist letter, the person that's the subject of the letter, they may not be at the level of a Laurel. We get a lot of folks that they will write somebody in because they see their person doing awesome stuff, but it's not quite there yet. And we will keep an eye on that person, but what we may do is, somebody may decide, well, they're not at the Laurel level, but maybe one of us will write a letter to the OVO, or maybe one of us will write a letter for a Meridian Cross, make sure that this person gets some recognition. If this is somebody that, a couple of us go, somebody might step up and go, let me do a little investigation. Let me see if this person, if obviously nobody is stepping up saying, yeah, this is my apprentice. Well, let's do a little investigation. See if they have a peer. Let's see if they're associated with somebody. Let's do a little bit of research on them. And somebody will usually step up and kind of be a sponsor, and hopefully reasonably subtly look around and see what they're doing and try and get to know them, and kind of, sometimes an association will come out of that. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes we discover, hey, this person really is really close, and I'm gonna run with this person. Sometimes you look around and you go, and I figure it happened in reverse for me. I was an apprentice, and there were people in the Pelican who were going, oh, this person really needs to be in our circle. And the Pelicans in that circle reached out to my Laurel and said, hey, let's chat, because we want to do a thing, and we want to bring her up. And so a couple people in the Pelican sponsored me after talking to my Laurel. We kind of do that in the Laurel circle. It was like, hey, you got a squire, Ulrich. Let me talk to you about your squire. I may not put a belt on your squire, but your squire is doing some really awesome things, and I think they're really close. Let me talk to you about your plans and your timeline, and what your squire is doing, and how receptive would this be? Would it be a welcome thing? Because there's some awesome art going on there, and so there's reaching out, and there's working on things like that. You don't have to be an apprentice to be laureled. And we actually value those populist letters, because a lot of times those populist letters will help us see things that we might have overlooked, or they might help us find a focus that we kind of knew that was out there, but that gives us a little bit more focus. So, you don't have to be an apprentice to be noticed, and we have ways of shepherding the folks who aren't directly associated. But if you do have an apprentice, it's your job to bring them up. Now, how you decide to do that, everybody has kind of a different theory. It's like I have a tendency to ask around amongst the Laurels and say, hey, I think my kid is ready. What do you guys think? Give me some feedback. And I do that on a one-to-one basis before I throw them out there. Or I might put them on the watch list and say, hey, informally, start giving me some feedback. I want you to be watching before I actually do a formal discussion. Honestly, if somebody just says, hey, I want to do a formal discussion on Mistress Stephanie's apprentice without ever discussing it to me, that's considered really rude in our circle.
Would it be okay if I was like, hey, Mr. Stephanie, I've been noticing really good things out of your apprentice, Bob, and I really think you should put Bob. You should consider Bob. Would that be okay if I came to you with that?
Yes.
Either as a Laurel or a non-Laurel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That we would generally have a discussion about that, and if I'm waiting, if I haven't done it yet, there might be a reason why I haven't done it yet, and getting your feedback could really help me. And then, I might have a discussion with you and say, this is what concerns me. So give me some feedback on that and see if maybe I'm being too cautious, or if you think that's a relevant thing. Because, getting another perspective from another Laurel can be a really big help if I'm on a fence about something.
Awesome. I was hoping that would be the case. I know that works really well for us.
Yeah.
Just on a side note, it's been a minute, and I'm a little parched. So I'm going to cover my mastery about my rabbit hole documentation. Ooh, there we go. All right, so we've kind of covered how candidates are brought up. So without breaking any confidentiality, because that's a thing, what kind of things are brought up in candidate discussions? What's discussed about a candidate?
Well,
Mistress Tadc? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Their art, of course. We want to talk about what they're doing and with their art. I used to call it the tripod. We want to see how people feel about what they're contributing as in peer-like qualities, and I'm at a loss all of a sudden. Sorry. No, seriously. I mean, it's just how well they do their art, their peer-like qualities, and do we feel like they would be a good fit for the Laurel Circle? Other than that, I'm not going to really be the best person for this. I'll let Stephanie say.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's go to mastery. Because we got to get the word in there. I mean, again, it's and what is a period master and what is a modern master? We want to know that the person has been doing their research, that they've really gotten into the guts of the thing that inspired their passion, and that they know how it was done in period, that they poked around in the nooks and crannies of their artwork, that they know what materials were used, that they know what tools were used, and that they understand the motifs, and that how things worked, and whether it's cooking or illumination or dance or singing or dyeing or armory, that they understood what materials were available, how the tools were used and made, and how the artwork was created, and then that they've come from that, and how have they taken all that knowledge, and how have they learned it, and how have they expressed it themselves, and in the places where they couldn't do it exactly as it was done in period, how have they found ways to do it themselves. It's as close as they could get, and how have they expressed that, and how have they gotten it so good that when you look at it, your jaw drops and you just go, oh my God, that's I can't even. So we want to see that. We want to see the passion. We want to see the artwork. We want to see the skill. We want to see the knowledge, and then we want to see you be able to teach it. We want to be able to see you sharing all that knowledge. We want to see you inspiring others, and not just with your own stuff. We want to see you looking at other people doing things and going, oh my God, that's so cool. Let me figure out how to help you fly in your realm, and let me teach you what I know, and then you teach me what you know. And we want to make sure that when people are teaching this stuff, that they're doing their best to teach the accurate information. What we know about medieval artisanry is like this, and it used to be this, and now it's like this. But we know there's all this stuff out here, and we're learning all the time, and we want to make sure that the people that are out there that we're looking at, that they're constantly trying to find the most accurate information that they can get, and that they're paying attention to logical information, and that they're, like, all right, so this was what we knew about this thing 20 years ago, but look at all this information we have now. And some of this isn't right anymore. So let's get the right information out there. And as we're learning the better information, let's make sure we're sharing that and not continually perpetuating inaccurate information. And so we want people that are out there teaching to the best of their ability the most correct information that they know, and that when they find out that they have inaccurate information, that they're changing it, they're updating it, they're sharing it out there. And that's what we want. We want people that are out there trying to engage the inner geek in everybody that they touch. And that they're finding those rabbit holes and falling down them and dragging people with them and finding the rabbit holes that the other people really want in their stuff and pushing them off into them, and sending them down with glitter and candy and whiskey and saying, go and have a great time and show me what you found when you get to the other end. And then on top of that, you have the PLQs. We want you to be a good leader. We want you to help people. We want you to be somebody that people are comfortable going to if you have a question, whether it's in the arts or whether it's, I don't know how to deal with this troll thing. It's like, well, I might not either. I do, but I might not either, but I can help you make sure you can get through troll. I can get you to the right person you need to deal with. Or I need to be able to advise the crown. Or if the crown comes to me and wants information, I need to be able to do that. So, we're looking for all those things, people that are going to support the kingdom and the populace and the artisans in all the best ways.
Last week, we recovered the requirements for all peerages, so we're not really going to go into depth in that again. But here's what Corpora says about the requirements specifically for the Laurel. Members of the Order of the Laurel may choose to swear fealty, but are not required to do so. The candidate must have attained the standard of excellence in skill and or knowledge equal to that of his or her prospective peers in some area of the arts or sciences. The candidate must have applied the skill and or knowledge for the instruction of members and service to the kingdom to an extent above and beyond that normally expected of members of the society. In the corporate requirements of peerages we covered last week, such as being a good member of the society, knowing how to dance, knowing how to play chess, doing service, understanding the combat arts, and the entire support the SCA as a whole thing. Is that brought up in your meetings when discussing a candidate? And if so, how does that discussion generally go?
We don't really talk about the society requirements. I mean, most of that stuff is kind of wrapped up in the general discussion, and every now and again we'll have somebody who feels it's really important that the non-fighting peerages address whether candidates can fight or know something about fighting. Like I know Duke Garrick would occasionally say, "Hey, do they know anything about fighting? Because I feel that's important that they know." So, yeah, they know. But I don't think maybe 3 times has somebody ever said, "Can they play chess? Do they know what chess is?" we rarely discuss, because the vast majority of the things that society requires is pretty much encompassed in the stuff we're talking about.
The PLQs.
Yeah.
The Steward of Society section.
I don't know how to play chess.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I would love to.
No, I don't know. So one day.
You don't know how to play chess? Do you want to learn how to play chess?
One day.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Not right this second.
No.
That'd be a boring show.
And I can play chess. I do it badly. I mean, it's. I've watched The Queen's Gambit, and I've watched Searching for Bobby Fischer, and it's like, I know where the little horsey goes.
Doesn't say you have to be good at it. It just says
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I know where the horsey goes.
All right, so we've covered the procedures for bringing up the candidates and the requirements. Now that that's all over, and what's the process for recommendation? What happens to actually get to the point where the order says, Your Majesties, we'd like to recommend, or we do not recommend at this time this candidate. Once you've gone through the polling procedure, how does that go? And what do you do if the Crown disagrees, either with elevating someone, or that they think you should when the order says you shouldn't? When the order doesn't recommend positively, sorry.
Well, if everything's gone well in the discussion for your candidate, you're going to turn to the Crown and state that you feel like you can recommend them to the order at that time. I personally have never been there when the Crown did not agree. I don't know if Stephanie has, so I couldn't say anything about that.
It's happened in the Pelican,
Okay,
once or twice. Generally, that the Crown said, I choose not to elevate this candidate, and the order has been pretty much okay, and we keep track of it. And when the next Crown comes up, it's like, Your Majesty, we have an outstanding recommendation. And if another Crown chooses not to recommend, there's not a lot that the order can do about that, because we don't have the authority to elevate. Just kind of keep telling the Crown, we have an outstanding recommendation. We'd really like for you to put some laurel leaves on this little baby bush. It would be awesome. Make her a tree. Make him a tree. But I haven't. Oh, good! I broke Ulrich again. Woo!
Fine.
But I don't know that that's. I can't think if that has happened in the Laurel. Hardly at all. On the occasions when a Crown has disagreed with a negative recommendation, generally we will try and talk the Crown out of elevating if we feel strongly about it. Usually individual laurels will discuss it with the Crown privately. Occasionally that discussion will happen in the meeting if enough of us feel strongly about it. Again, ultimately that decision rests with the Crown. On the occasions when it happens, it generally results in a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of angst. And I think that, again, falls back to the fact that, at least in Meridies, our tradition is one of collaborative, collective effort. And there's decades of history there, and it's a cultural thing. So, we recognize that the Crown has that ultimate authority. And sometimes it gets challenging when that doesn't work the way we're all used to it working that way. But it doesn't happen very often.
Once we move past candidate discussion, what other things do you discuss at Laurel meetings? I know you touched on the Gulf Wars champion a bit, but is there anything else that, if you have the time for more, and I understand you probably often don't have the time for more, but if you do, what other subjects other than candidates would you generally speak about?
a lot of that's fairs or ANS events coming up, scheduling, and who's judging what. But that was very prevalent when I was going to meetings, but now we're able to do a lot of that online. So it's kind of taken away that time consumption and so that we can do it online a little more, giving more to the candidates at the meetings.
Yeah, we talk about Stella Nova, which is it's designed for novices who want to get their feet wet in how ANS fairs work. And there's different kinds of ANS fairs. There are open fairs where you just bring your stuff, and there's usually a populist choice, and everybody looks at it, and you get like a little bead where people say, "Ooh, your stuff is really cool," and the more beads you have, you might win a prize. And then there are displays where you can say, "I'd like some feedback," but you don't want actual in-depth critical feedback. And when I say critical, I don't mean in a bad way. I mean constructive, in-depth, going over all the details where you get a score and you have a panel of laurels and oboes giving you that feedback. And then you have like Kingdom Arts and Sciences Fair and a couple of others that are judged, where we sit down and we have a scoring sheet, and we have kind of specific things that we're looking at, and we give you very detailed feedback on things like your documentation and your mastery, artistry, techniques, complexity, that kind of stuff. And we'll sit and talk to you face to face for as long as we can, as long as time allows. And we'll go over as much detail as we can and try and give you feedback on, this is what you're doing really well. These are areas where you need to work a little bit more. Here are some ideas for finding other sources or for branching out, or where you can improve on both your research and your skill. And so Stella Nova is designed to prepare you for the higher level, like Kingdom ANS stuff. But if you've never been in the process, it can be really intimidating. And we acknowledge that because there's a lot of components to it. So we set you up with a mentor who will walk you through all the things, all the pieces and the parts. And then when we have the actual fair, the mentor sits with you during the judging process, and their job is both to hold your hand and keep you calm and to kind of translate what the judges are saying, so that when you hear them say, "You can work on this some more," and you hear, "You suck," your mentor says, No, you do not suck. You're doing really good. You can just do better on this, and this is why they're saying that. Don't hear what they're not saying." And they can also say, "Maybe you can say that a little bit better so it doesn't come out across quite so harshly." So, and Stella Nova is something that Mistress Maudlin and Countess Mistress Gwen brought into Meridies and from Callantyre, I think, and started really getting it going, and that has been really popular with a lot of novice artisans. Getting that going, I think it's helped a lot of people feel a lot more comfortable with the process.
Awesome. So we're about to get into the populist questions, and we realize that ANS fairs are certainly something that is discussed in meetings, especially now, and we're okay with talking about that. But for a lot of that will probably be covered in the ANS officer shows when we get into these myths down here. By the way, that'll be on March 8th. So if we don't get to the fair questions here, stay tuned for that show, and we'll try to get to them there.
So the populist questions are normally, this is where we normally cover them, but tonight we're just going to bust some myths and cover some topics of choice until we start to get pressed for time. And I'm just going to start right off the bat with one, because I think I've actually heard this one a lot, and it doesn't jive with just what I know of laurels in general. But it's that laurels are mean. And you're so mean that you keep a list of people that you're actively trying to keep out of the order. And then you sit around in your meetings and talk about how horrible those people are. Now, I want to note that we're not talking about not voting positively people who haven't reached the requisite skill level, but just solely keeping person X out of your order because you don't like them.
To me, The meanness I've heard before, and it usually generally radiates around criticisms that may have come up through, and even if it's a constructive criticism, it can be construed as mean through their works and ANS entries and stuff like that. I don't know of anybody that holds a piece of paper that says we will not have these people in our circle. Everyone gets a fair shake. I mean, that's very new to me. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, there's no list. There's no black ball. There's no list of they will never. This person is just absolutely never ever going to make it. We don't. We are way more interested in bringing people into the circle because we want all the artists to come and geek with us because we love that.
Yeah.
We just want to sit and art. And the more people that we can art with, the happier we are. We don't want to actively keep people out. What we're looking for is to reach a level of mastery and to be good teachers and to be people that will uplift. So we're not trying to keep anybody out. We're actively looking to bring awesome people in. Now we routinely hear they were so mean to us and they said horrible things in the judging. One of the things that we would love people to do, because we always hear these complaints 6 months to 47 years after the incident. And there have been a couple of times there have been one or two people that we have actually actively said, you are not allowed to ever judge anybody again because you are not good with people. But there aren't a lot of people that we have done that. And there comes a point sometimes where, it can be challenging, but we work really hard at find something good to say about people's artwork because people put their heart and soul into this. And there is always something that you can say that is awesome about what people have done. But by the same token, when you bring your art to us for feedback, you're going to get feedback. And we want to build you up, but we also want to share with you where you can improve. And we work really hard at that. If it doesn't come through well, and I ask everybody who's on the receiving end of that, if we hurt your feelings, it's never deliberate. But if you're uncomfortable with what was said, you need to let us know. And if you don't want to tell me, if you don't want to tell Tig that I said something mean, that Tig said something mean to you, go to a Laurel you're comfortable with and say, I don't understand why Stephanie said that the way she said it. And I don't understand. Or the way she said that hurt my feelings. They will come and they'll intercede or they'll talk to me, say, dude, why'd you say that way? Because we don't want to hurt your feelings. And if you can address it with us right then, in whatever way feels safe for you, it feels comfortable for you, we can fix that. If we hear that, 2 years later that Stephanie said something horrible to me about my blown glass thing, I can't fix that 2 years ago because by then I've eaten and slept and I don't remember the incident at all. And all I can do is go, I am so sorry. Please tell me when that happens. We actively try really hard to build you up. And if at any point we're mean, you got to let us know. And if you can't, if you're not comfortable telling us directly, find somebody you're comfortable with. It doesn't even have to be a Laurel. Somebody who's willing to intercede on your behalf will listen.
So something I want to cover right quick, and I think you brought it up, and it's coming a little bit through on the chat lines too. I know we all deal on, not all of us, Eric's a little special, but most of us deal with some kind of anxiety in some way, or stage fright, or just nervousness about putting yourself out there. Sometimes one of the things that a lot of people say is, fighters do it all the time. Well, we're also wearing helmets, so we have something in front of our face, and it's whether you can see us or not, we're out there, and that armor sometimes an actual armor for our psyche as much as it is for our bodies. So just entering a fair takes a level of bravery and the willingness to put yourself out there. Getting out on a fighting field does the same thing. Coming on these shows takes that. Standing up and talking in a peerage meeting or a grant level meeting where people are all turned towards you takes a level of confidence that sometimes you're faking just to get through, and that's okay. It's just one of those things that it's my own personal little soapbox that I wanted to get out there right quick. We're all dealing with it on some level, and we're just trying to get through. So the next question, or the next subject that we wanted to cover, was voting blocks. This came up last week in the Shiv discussion, and I was able to say there, I've never in 15 years I've never really seen a voting block in the Shiv, and I don't know that all knights think the same way, that we're all thinking and acting as a unit. I don't agree with myself half the time I'm doing stuff. So is that an issue for you guys too?
No.
Not at all. No. I've never seen a voting block per se. We're all very individual and very opinionated. And if I'm going to say something, I'm going to say it. And I don't care who around me likes it or doesn't like it. So voting blocks just don't, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Griffin and I are in the Pelican together. There are times when we don't vote the same way. Realistically, a lot of times those of us who know each other the best have a tendency to vote in similar ways because we've been talking about the candidates amongst ourselves and debating pluses and minuses and kind of sorting out our thoughts amongst each other. But, you get in the meeting and somebody says something that really resonates with me, but maybe not with Tig, or maybe not with Ulrich, or maybe not with Erik. And all of the little gears in my mental transmission just kind of shudder to a stop, and steam starts coming out, and I reassess how I think about things. And I may go completely off in a different direction on how I think about something. In all of the peerages, each and every one of us, we come from different backgrounds. We have different levels of education. We have different experiences. We are like Tig says, we're passionate people. We're opinionated people. We're smart people. We do research all over creation. We do not think in lockstep. And I gotta say too, you can't have voting blocks and be monolithic at the same time. Now, and realistically, I will also say that most of the time, most of the votes that I see in the orders that I'm in, they're pretty strong one way or the other. You usually get a big chunk of people voting yes or voting no. It's usually not, down to the wire. So most of us are generally working on a broad consensus, but it's for individual reasons because we've each had our own individual observations and experiences with a candidate, and every person's observations and experiences are valid. So no, not monolithic, not voting blocks, no quid pro quos.
Amen.
Testify. So I think we can squeeze one more of these in. So before we get to the online questions, so this is going to be a relatively simple one, but One of the myths that we heard is that Laurels favor traditional arts and aren't interested in anything different. Could you speak to that?
Wait, what? What? Hold the phone.
Let the Indian dance
hold
Laurel
the
speak to
phone.
that.
I'm an Indian dance Laurel. You know how weird that is? That was like off the chart back in the day. I mean, if I can do that, anybody can bring something up. You know, within reason. But yeah, that's completely busted right there. 2004 when I was elevated. No, in fact, we love unique. I embrace it because I want to learn something new. It may have been something that I haven't never seen before. Please, by all means, educate me as well along the way because that's something new and geeky and fun. So no. What do you think, Steph?
Oh, we love new odd stuff. We
Right.
love new stuff. I mean, we've had, you know, the concrete project, which, you know, we're all buzzing around like bees to honey. And then there was the pine bark bread. You know, I am not an adventurous eater. I'm sitting over there going, oh, this is so good. Let me taste this. Oh, this is actually kind of good. This is really cool. What are you doing with this? And then there was the lady that did the Mayan Codex, and we're sitting over here going, oh, let's talk about this and geeking all. I mean, you bring us new stuff, and if you do it well, we are just like buzzing, and you are dragging us down into your rabbit hole, and the second you do that, you know, you may know more than all of us do about whatever you're doing. But if you're doing it well, we start going off like a glitter bomb has exploded in our head and it's everywhere. And we start making these weird connections because we're doing all kinds of things too. And we start going, ooh, but if you do that, how does it affect this over here? And then you start, and then, you know, the person who's doing their thing, they start going, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like, I may not know anything about what you're doing, but one of the ways my brain works is to start asking questions and going off into tangents and trying to figure out how might that affect it if it did this, or if it did that, or if it connected over here, because I read this thing that's over here, but it sounds kind of like what you're doing over here. And so how did those hook up? And, you know, when that starts happening and you start getting that synergy going and everybody starts getting that. Now, if you just come in with something off the wall that nobody's heard of, and you ran across it on Google 2 weeks ago, and you come into Kingdom A&S and you bring in like a Wikipedia article, and you're doing something really funky, we're just going to kind of go, that's a good start. Bring us something with really cool documentation, like from Oxford or Oxbow, and bring us something more. But when you come in with, you know, I've been working on this for, you know, the last 6 months, and these are the directions I've gone, and this is the stuff that I've brought in, and here are some, you know, here's the stuff that I've figured out, and I've connected it in with this, and I've got this depth of knowledge, and you're all over the place, and we're going, this is so cool. We love this stuff. We eat it up. Please bring it, because we adore that stuff.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to move into the populace, the live feed questions now. The first one we have comes from Baroness Rhonda Saren, which is it beneficial to write to a candidate to be written in multiple times, or does it hurt their chances more? So populace letters.
So it kind of depends. If they all come in kind of a general time frame.
Letter writing campaigns.
Yeah.
It's okay to say it.
Yeah. So yes and no. We'd really rather, when we see those letters, not have them be like you copied and pasted the same stuff. Tell us what you think. I mean, because if a bunch of people think that Lady Alicia is doing something really awesome with her work, tell us in your words what you think we need to know. And if everybody wants to sit down and write their own letter and send it in to us, and it's sincere, then we want to know that. If you just send us one letter with a bunch of signatures on it, that doesn't have as much meaning, because we want to see people take the effort to say, yeah, this is why this person's artwork affects me, and why we think that they're important. But regardless, when we get those letters in, we're gonna look at Lady Alicia and see what she's doing. And because, obviously, regardless of how you did it, a bunch of people think she's doing something good, and we want to assess that. And you do need to be aware that we don't act fast. This doesn't happen overnight. The letters come in, they have to get on an agenda. We have to read them. We have to discuss them in a meeting. Somebody's got to volunteer to say, okay, let's take some time to look. That might take a while. Something might happen, something might not. It doesn't necessarily mean we're disregarding it, but it might mean that this person isn't ready and it's going to take a while, and we're going to have to look at it. So I don't know that it necessarily hurts a candidate, because we want to be fair to the candidate. We're always going to be fair to the person that we're getting the letters on. So no, I wouldn't say it's gonna hurt a candidate. The way you go about it is going to be, we're going to be more receptive to how those letters are presented and whether they're written from the heart by a lot of people. But we're still going to look at it, and we're going to give every candidate a fair shake. I think that's a better way of saying it.
No, that's perfectly fair. So I'm just going to say this person's first name. It's Kat, because I not Kat Korn. Yeah. How do you help someone who struggles with teaching?
I can answer that one. I didn't start out teaching very well. I had to be schooled in it, and I found several Laurels that were willing to help me learn how to teach, because it's something learned. It's not something God given per se. And any of us would be willing to help someone learn how to teach, how to set up a class schedule, syllabus, basically, of what you want to do and how to do that. It's as simple as that, really. And it's a confidence thing. You will have to build confidence in how you're teaching. And some people are just a little bit better at it, and it takes time. At first, I was horrible. So over the years, though, I start finding a rhythm, and was able to do so. Anything else?
And there's different kinds of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are better teaching in a larger setting, in a classroom setting. Some people shine when they teach one-on-one, or in impromptu settings, or on an artisan's row, where people come to them. Some people do better in their garage, where they have their setup right there. And teaching is teaching, and it's easier for us to assess your ability to teach if we can go to a formal class, and that's part of why it's helpful if you're willing to learn how to do that, because it makes it easier for us to be able to see what you're doing. But if you're teaching, that becomes known. It just takes it a little bit longer for that information to get out there. So, there are good ways to do it. So, find your vibe and be willing to push your comfort zone. And like Tig said, there are people who will help teach you how to teach. If you're willing to push your comfort zone, that's growth as an artist as well. And that's always a good thing.
I think you actually covered our final question, which was Alyssa's about. So I think we're good then.
Well, since we covered all of the questions, is there anything that the two of you believe that we've missed that you'd like to cover or speak to?
I don't think so. Obviously, if you listen to me, substitutions.
Oh, yeah.
Substitutions are really important because I think that was one of your myths, that we don't allow substitutions. Substitutions actually are important. We acknowledge those. If you want to make food safe ceramics, you're gonna have to use some substitutions because you don't want to do stuff with white lead if you're gonna be eating off of it. There are chemicals out there that you might actually need to have a federal hazardous license to dispose of. Not everybody not everybody can spend 12 hours a day and has a household full of apprentices to be able to do all of the labor required for some of the stuff that they do. Not everybody can afford $500 a yard fabric to make certain outfits. The whole issue with substitutions is that it's really important that you understand, as to the best degree that you can, how they did things in period, what they used in period, what the materials were, what the tools were, what everything meant, how it was used. And if you can't get what they had, if you can't use what they had for whatever reason, the sheep are extinct, they don't have that kind of tree anymore, whatever. You have to understand that well enough to figure out what's the closest process that I can adapt. What is the best material that I can find that mimics that process or that material, that I can reasonably afford, that I can reasonably incorporate into this project. You have to know what they did. You have to know why they did it, how it behaved, so you can find something that works, that's reasonable. We don't ask you to spend, your 401k retirement to do your projects, but you have to plan, you have to think strategically, and you have to understand, and you have to be able to support why you made that substitution, because substitutions are entirely reasonable. So yeah, substitutions are fine. You just have to support them, and you have to document them, and you have to know why you're doing them and how you're doing them.
Anything we missed on your end, Tig?
That's exactly it. If you can't afford certain things, or you don't want to work in, let's say, etching acids or certain chemicals and things like that, you don't want to do that. So you find the best thing you can, and you make sure that in your documentation that you're absolutely putting that. You know exactly what they used, but this is why that you're not using that, and the closest thing you can possibly do to that 4-period piece. She said it all. So.
And sometimes cost is an important thing. If you're doing a Kingdom Arts and Sciences project, sometimes cost is still going to be a consideration, even with the substitution. If you're thinking about doing something, you may not ever have the budget to go to Sartor and pay the $300 a yard for the highest quality brocade that they have. But if you really want to do the Eleanor of Toledo gown, maybe you can figure out how to save up for the $35 a yard stuff that they have. You're going to have to be strategic. You're going to have to think about it. You can't cheap out with the $2 a yard quilting cotton. You just can't. But if you think about it and if you plan for it, you can always come up with a way. And there are people who will help you, who will give you resources, who will say, hey, there's a sale going on over here for this thing. You know, don't try and do it in a bubble and be isolated. You know, this is part of that whole geeking out with your art friends, because they'll be, if I know that you're looking for something and I see something that I know you're going to be able to use, like, dude, check out over here, Paper and Ink Arts, they got a sale going on, get it now. You know, you can't just, you know, say it's a substitution and I paid $1 a yard for, or I paid $1 for a skein of Red Heart acrylic because I couldn't afford $40 a skein silk. Like, that's not a good substitution. You do have to put a little bit of money aside when you're thinking about it, but you can make those reasonable substitutions. Just be strategic and figure out what your budget is and plan for it.
All right, so we're on to the shout out portion of the show. Are there any particular person or shows that you watch or books that you're reading that you want to just bring to everyone's attention? It doesn't have to be. There's no limit on this. So
I know that I'm reading, like a lot of people, slowly, a little bit at a time. I'm reading Silk Roads by Peter Frankopian. Which is a really good, inclusive history of how pretty much Central Asia and everything that's not Western Europe tied into the development of 3,000 years worth of history, and how it's not all Western European centric. And I'm working my way through that, and that's really cool. I'm not really watching a lot of shows right now. I'm watching Stag and Hound. I really like the fighting stuff from Saturday night, so I enjoyed that. And I want to do little shout outs to their excellencies of Gladenfeld, to His Excellency William McNaughton of Thor's Mountain, just for the little hits of humor that they post out there, the bad puns and the funny memes, and to our Kingdom Seneschal Mittens for the daily check-in. He was like, hey, this is what I'm doing today. It's gonna be a good day. You know, we can get through this. I like everybody who's doing a really good job of putting those little things out there that says, we're all here together. We see you. I love you. Come with me. We're going to have a good day. I also want to shout out to Erik Martell for doing that too, because he does that periodically, and I appreciate it.
So I'd also like to say thanks to everybody that's doing all the work on the internet. I am a Luddite. It is very difficult for me to even do a lot of the Zoom meetings and things like that. I'm learning along the way. It's taken a while. But everybody that's contributing and doing classes online, and you guys with this Stag and Hound, just keeping us together, keeping us feeling like we're still family, and it's important. I want to thank everyone for that. So.
Thank you. Erik, you got anything?
Not in Kingdom, but I want to say thank you for Duke Brenna for being a wealth of information and compiling a great deal of training videos that are going to be, I believe, very helpful to the entirety of the Meridian and Society fighting community when we're all able to get back to it. It's going to be a real treasure of knowledge.
You can catch Duke Branos and Duke Sean and a few others on the SCA Coaches Corner over on the SCA virtual fighter practice that Vespera Valania does. It's some great stuff. You can also catch him on Tuesday nights on Great Fighters of YouTube, which tomorrow night, by the way, will be Glen Aubin. So join us there. And thanks you two for not making me have to do shameless self-promotion, calling out the Saturday show. So that was awesome. So that's what I have.
We'd like to thank our guests, Dame Stephanie and Mistress Tadc, for joining us. We'd also like to thank Her Ladyship Jessica Vosbury for her graphics and showrunner magic. I don't think you people appreciate how much she does for this show and a lot of the internet and activities that we have in this kingdom. We'd also like to thank Her Excellency Katerina for keeping us on time, and I think you all know how much trouble that is. We'd like to thank Mistress Adriana for her help with screenwriting, with script writing and flow, Lord Kikuchi for technical consulting, and really most importantly, you guys for showing up and being a part of this.
So next week, join us for The Pelican, where we'll be joined by Sir Connell McDale, a wise and influential knight, and Mistress Honora Draper, where we will discuss how the Pelican meetings run and the procedures and what is discussed in them. Also, next week we'll have a special guest host, which will be Duke Thomas. Sir Eric or Baron Erik will be having a personal night to deal with some stuff.
If you're watching live and you'd like to join us after the show for a chat or to hang out, then watch the Hound and Stag main page, the announcements page. We'll take a little break. Then about 5 minutes after the show goes off the air, Graf and Katerina will post a link to the Zoom and we'll hang out and chat for about a half an hour.
Finally, if you're watching the replay on YouTube or the live feed on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe down here. And if you're watching on Facebook, don't forget to like us up here. And it'll help get our show a few more views and a little more circulation. All right. That's what we've got.
Thank
Good
you
night,
for
everybody.
having on.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming.
And if I die in battle, tomorrow I'll be home, though it's 70 days' march to there from Rome. But a soul travels swiftly on the night wind, and if I die in battle, I'll be home again.